He was just walking home, nothing more. No uniform, no medals, no fanfare. Just a man carrying a simple duffel bag down the quiet streets of his old neighborhood. But one officer saw him differently, saw him as a threat, saw him as someone to control. What that officer didn't know was that this man had spent 2 decades serving in the most dangerous corners of the world. He had faced warlords, terrorists, and enemies who stopped at nothing, and yet the greatest battle of his life was about to happen on a street he once called home. And this time, everyone was watching. Before we dive in, hit that like button and subscribe so more stories like this reach people who need to hear them. The late afternoon sun stretched across the cracked sidewalks of Montgomery, Alabama. The air was heavy with summer heat, cicadas humming in the background, as Marcus Kane walked slowly through the neighborhood he hadn't seen in over a decade. He wasn't dressed like a soldier. No uniform, no insignia, just a plain black t-shirt, worn jeans, and boots that had seen better days. But there was something about the way he carried himself. Shoulders squared, chin steady, eyes scanning every detail around him, that made strangers glance twice. Years of training don't disappear when the uniform comes off. Marcus was 41 now, though his body still carried the strength and discipline of the Navy SEAL he had been since his 20s. He had served in Afghanistan, Iraq, and places the government never admitted soldiers were sent. He had led men through firefights where seconds meant life or death. He had buried brothers in arms, carried scars that would never fully heal, and endured missions so brutal they haunted his sleep. And yet here he was, back home, back in the very streets where he had once learned to ride a bike, where his mother used to call him in for dinner. But the world had changed, and so had he. Home didn't feel like home anymore. It felt fragile, like something that could be taken away in an instant. He didn't know that within minutes he'd be reminded of just how fragile freedom can feel, not on a battlefield overseas, but right here in his own country. Because while Marcus had fought enemies abroad, he was about to face something far more familiar, a uniform, a badge, and a man who believed authority meant power over dignity. The sound came slowly at first, the low hum of an engine rolling behind him. Marcus didn't turn. He already knew what it was. Years of instincts sharpened in hostile zones taught him to recognize the rhythm of a vehicle that wasn't just passing through. The patrol car crawled beside him, tires crunching against the curb. A voice called out, "Sharp! Authority dripping with suspicion! Hey, hold up a second." Marcus stopped, turning his head just enough to see the officer behind the wheel. White mid-40s, thick neck, mirrored sunglasses hiding his eyes. The kind of man who looked at the world and saw categories, who belonged and who didn't. "You live around here?" the officer asked. Marcus's expression stayed calm. "Born and raised," the officer's lips pressed thin. "Mind telling me where you're headed?" Marcus tilted his head slightly. "Didn't realize I needed permission to walk home." The officer stepped out of the car now, letting the door slam harder than necessary. His boots crunched the gravel. "We've had some break-ins. Gotta make sure everything's in order." Marcus let the words hang in the air before answering. "Do I look like I'm breaking into something?" The question was simple, but the officer didn't like it. His jaw twitched. Control was slipping and he wanted it back. "Let's see some ID." Marcus's pulse stayed steady. He could hear his old commander's voice in his head. Never let them dictate the battlefield. Slowly, deliberately, Marcus reached into his pocket and pulled out his wallet. He showed his military ID card, not handing it over, just holding it where the officer could see. The man squinted. A smirk spread across his face, one that carried mockery rather than respect. "Navy SEAL, huh? That's a good story. Real cute." The insult landed like a slap, but Marcus didn't flinch. He'd heard worse in combat zones, from men who didn't live long enough to see morning. "Return it," Marcus said, his voice even. Instead, the officer snatched the ID straight from his hand, turned it over slowly like he was inspecting a fake dollar bill. "You expect me to believe you were out there fighting for this country?" He let out a short laugh. "Please." Across the street, the teenager's phone tilted higher. Cameras were out now. Witnesses were multiplying. Marcus remained still, but inside, the old instinctive gears of training began to turn. This wasn't a battlefield, but it was a standoff, and the officer didn't realize just how badly he was outmatched. "Give it back," Marcus said again, voice steady. The officer stepped closer, just an inch too close. "Out here I make the calls, not you." And that's when Marcus knew. This wasn't about law. It wasn't about safety. It was about one man's pride, one man's obsession with control. And control, Marcus understood better than anyone, was something you never surrendered to the wrong hands. The silence broke with the sound of metal. The officer's hand snapped to his cuffs, pulling them free in one quick motion. "Hands behind your back, now!" Marcus didn't move. For a second, he thought of the irony, after years of slipping behind enemy lines, rescuing hostages and dismantling terror cells. His freedom was being stripped away on the very streets he fought to protect. For what? Marcus asked, his voice calm but edged with steel. The officer's reply came cold. "Resisting," witnesses gasped. Some shouted, "He didn't resist!" Phones angled closer. But the officer didn't care. His hand pressed into Marcus's shoulder, forcing him toward the hood of the patrol car. Marcus felt the sting of humiliation more than the pressure. He could have broken free in a heartbeat. Training screamed inside him, a dozen moves to end this in seconds. But he didn't, because he knew one wrong motion, one flash of instinct, and he wouldn't just be another veteran mistreated. He'd be another headline, "Black man shot by police." The cuffs clicked shut around his wrists, tight, too tight. The officer leaned in close, his breath hot with arrogance. "Not so tough now, are you?" Marcus shut his eyes for a second. He pictured the teammates he lost overseas. Men who sacrificed everything believing they were building a safer, freer country. And here he was, shackled like a criminal, not because of his actions, but because of the color of his skin and the pride of one man in uniform. The crowd's voices grew louder. "Let him go! We're filming this!" The officer's smirk faltered for the first time. His eyes flicked toward the cameras. He had wanted control. Now the control was slipping. Marcus straightened his back, even in chains. His voice cut through the chaos, calm but sharp as a blade. "The difference between you and me? I fought for freedom. You're afraid of it." For a moment, the world seemed to stop. The officer froze. The crowd went silent, and in that silence, the truth of the injustice hung heavy in the air, undeniable, unignorable. The cuffs eventually came off, not because the officer admitted fault, but because the crowd's pressure grew impossible to ignore. Videos were already spreading online. Backup arrived, supervisors stepped in, and the officer's story began to unravel in real time. Marcus rubbed his wrists where the steel had bitten into his skin. He didn't thank them. He didn't need to. The truth was clear. If not for the cameras, his night could have ended in silence, in a cell or worse. That's the weight of this injustice. It wasn't just about Marcus. It was about what happens when power goes unchecked. About how quickly a man who gave everything for his country can be stripped of dignity on his own soil, in his own neighborhood. And here lies the cruelest irony. Marcus fought in places where freedom was a dream. He risked his life believing America was different. Yet back home, his uniform didn't shield him. His service didn't protect him. To that officer, none of it mattered. The videos sparked outrage. Some called for the officer's suspension. Others dismissed it as misunderstanding. But for Marcus, the damage was already done. You can't erase the memory of steel on your wrists, the sting of being treated as less than human. This story is not an isolated one. It is a mirror, a reflection of deeper cracks in a system where justice too often depends on the color of your skin, or the silence of bystanders. And so the question remains, how many more battles must be fought, not overseas, but right here at home? How many more heroes must come back from war, only to discover that the hardest fight of their lives is for the basic respect they should never have to earn? And now, it is in your hands, the viewers, to remember, to question, to demand better. Because if a Navy SEAL isn't safe from injustice, what does that say about the rest of us? If you've experienced or witnessed the same, share your story in the comments, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video so together we can spread the message further.